Hello, everybody out there in TV land, and welcome to another week in space. I'm your host with the most, Joan Emerson Bell, DJ Blind Stallion Space Wizard, coming to bring you all the astro weather that you may or may not need, that you might not even know that you need yet to help you navigate another fun-filled week in space. And yeah, come on in, make yourselves comfortable, sit down, relax, take a load off, and we will jump into the astrology of the week in just a moment. But I want to let folks know out there in the tubes of the internet that on top of this, because I'm a madman, I also do an astrology themed radio show called the Melee Report, which comes out every week. I've been doing it on Sundays, so it comes out on Sunday nights to my patrons, and then it comes out on Mondays to the general populace. So after this, I will be putting a link in my stories and in the show notes so that you can check out the Melee report. It is a similar astrology report to this, but it is less talk, more rock. I go through the transits of the week and make playlists that correlate with the energies of the space weather so that you can kind of dance your way through your week in space. So I just want to let folks know about that because it's maybe the best thing that I've ever done in my life. And yeah, it comes out on SoundCloud and under Camp Wizard Camp. But I'll put a link in the show notes and in my stories. What's up, everybody? Welcome on in. Yeah, this week's episode, we're talking about the Venus-Saturn conjunction, as well as doing a recap on Neptune's ingress into Aries. But yeah, you can check that out for yourself. Right now, let's talk about the space weather of this week. We're looking at April 7th through April 13th, and we're actually gonna kick it off um, going back in time to Sunday, April the 6th, which would have been yesterday, because we didn't get a chance to talk about that in last week's episode. I spent a long time talking about Neptune's ingress in Aries because that's kind of a important situation. So unfortunately, we skipped out on some of the transits that were happening yesterday, but let's just touch on them real quick to enter into the astrology of the week. So Sunday, April the 6th, we had the Sun in Aries sextile Jupiter in Gemini. This was going down at 16 degrees and 50 arc minutes. A sextile is a supportive aspect. It is two signs in the same polarity, right? So traditionally, it's masculine and masculine, or feminine and feminine. We can think about this as active and receptive, or diurnal and nocturnal, whatever works for you, yin and yang. But Aries and Gemini are both active, right? And so we get a sextile, and there's kind of support between these two active signs. Right. So this can help us to get into a positive state of mind. The sun, right, is our sort of solar consciousness, ego identity. It is our aspirational qualities, how we would like to shine our light in the world. And Jupiter, the greater benefic, is expansive, right? It provides wisdom, it provides support, it helps us to create systems that make things work. Which is maybe different than some of the things that some of us may have experienced in our lives. But Jupiter is like, oh no, I got this, right? So when the sun, the solar like sense of consciousness comes into the supportive aspect with Jupiter, it can create a sense of optimism, right? And Jupiter's like, oh yeah, like no problem, we got this, and can help us move forward towards our solar goals. We can think about this transit as expanding our solar light, or our ability to shine our light into the world, right? Jupiter is interested in wisdom, and the sun is aspirational. So we can use Jupiter's wisdom to support what we aspire to and what we want to shine our light on, and how we want to shine our light into this world. Jupiter deals with belief, right? And so this is a good time to tune into and reflect on your belief systems. You know, especially I think belief is really important during kind of trying and turbulent times like we are experiencing, and not sort of a blind sense of belief, but being like, this is what these are my core values, right? And the sun, I think, has a lot to do with what is at our core, that like true sense of self and that deep kind of identity. Right. And Jupiter is kind of like making a little space for that to shine. And I think in times of pressure, in times of turmoil, that is an opportunity to get really in touch with that solar core and to have the belief or the faith or the Jupiterian optimism to be like, oh yeah, this is okay, this is right for me, right? And so this is an opportunity also to see how our beliefs support our goals and what we are striving towards. Right? And this is a time that is thought of as lucky, right? Jupiter is a planet of luck. So we can think about the ways that luck might support us right now, right? And not to have a blind faith, right? But to keep our eyes open because luck can come in many forms, right? Luck can come in forms that are feel unfortunate at first, but can turn out in ways that are really beneficial in the long run, right? This is a time to right activate this aspect through reaching out and taking action. A sextile is a little bit of a passive aspect in the sense that it requires us to do something to take action to sort of activate it, right? So we can think about putting in effort to move us towards our goals and our ideals, right, leading into this week, right? This is also a good time for expanding awareness or feeding the parts of our psyches in our life that would like to grow bigger. You know, Jupiter is expansive, but will expand whatever you give them. Right. So if we have some solar ideas that are maybe like not the most helpful, right? Solar ideas of who I am based on, negative feedback that people have given me in my life, and I'm offering that to Jupiter, it's going to make it bigger. Right. If I have solar ideas around like what I'm aspiring to based on inner sense of core values, and I hand that to Jupiter, Jupiter's like, cool, right? Here you go. Bam. So just something to think about. And again, that transit was exact yesterday, and a sextile is a bit of a weak aspect. However, I think it's supporting us moving into this week. And hey, any support that we can get from space right now, I'm gonna take it. All right. So the other transit that was exact yesterday, Sunday, April the 6th, was Mars in Cancer, trine Venus retrograde in Pisces. This is going down at 25 degrees and 29 arc minutes of these water signs. Um, so Venus draws things to them, right? Mars goes out and gets stuff. Venus says, "Hey, I like that." Mars is like, "No problem, baby. I'm gonna go get that for you," and then brings it back. And Venus takes pleasure in that thing. Venus is like, "Oh man, this is the best. I want to rub it all over my face." All right. Venus also sweetens, which is really nice. Mars can be pretty direct. And so Venus can soften the hard edges of that martial force and directness. This also helps us to balance our personal needs or desires, which we can think about as Mars, with how we fit into a larger relational field, which is Venus. Right. This also maybe provide energy for creativity, right? Because Mars is action and Venus is beauty. So this is a good time to take actions that can increase beauty or bring beauty to you. So good time for creative processes and projects, right? And again, this is exact yesterday, but we are, still riding this wave. Also, this is going to come back around because we have a full moon in Libra rounding out this week. And Libra is ruled by Venus and it is opposing opposing Aries, who is ruled by Mars, right? So we have the sun in Aries and we'll have the moon in Libra, giving us a full moon. So this sort of martial Venusian energy in a supportive aspect kicking off this week will also sort of we'll revisit that in a different form through the shape of this lunation, but we'll be carrying kind of this vibe of the Venusian relational and the Mars individual, right? My individual desires and how that fits into a larger relational context and how we can learn from relationship, right? And how that informs our sense of individuality. So, I think that this relationship between Mars and Venus, especially in this harmonious aspect, is providing some interesting lessons that hopefully will be reintegrated towards the end of the week in the shape of this full moon. So again, this is a great time for taking action around what you think is beautiful, right? Making art, engaging in creative expression. Might also be a good time to reach out to someone you're attracted to, maybe to make a move, but Mercury is still retrograde and Venus is still retrograde, so maybe wait till the end of the week to make your move. I don't know, but I'm gonna leave it up to you. All right, that brings us up to date to Monday, April the 7th, which happens to be today. And today we have Venus retrograde in Pisces conjunct Saturn in Pisces at 25 degrees and 15 arc minutes of that mutable water sign of the fishes. So just a heads up about the kind of dance that Venus and Saturn have been doing. The first conjunction was back on January the 18th. And so we might want to think about what was going on in mid-January. If you can remember all the way back then, feels like I've lived lifetimes since January, right? But we had that first conjunction on January the 18th. So, we may be revisiting some of the themes. There may be echoes or rhymes back to that time as Venus is making their second conjunction to Saturn. And then the last conjunction in this series or in this dance will be on April the 24th, which will kind of conclude the Venus-Saturn story for the time being. So just a little context to put this all in. So Saturn, planet of limitation, restriction, a bit of a curmudgeon, kind of a lonely guy, right? Think about Saturn as like a bitter, kind of lonely old man, right? Who is like sitting there being like, turn that down, right? Stop playing ball in my yard, right? Where Venus is, relational into beautiful things, into, connection. So it's a bit of a odd couple with a Venus-Saturn conjunction. But Saturn helps Venus to have good boundaries, which I think is really important. Again, Saturn, a planet dealing with limitations, right? And so boundaries are a form of limitation. And this is a way that limitations can be really helpful because I think that we can't have a really good yes without having a very strong no. And this is one of Venus's lessons, right? Is about what I like and what I don't like. And Saturn helps to reinforce, oh, I don't like that. So I'm not available for that. I can't do that right now, or I'm not interested in doing that, right? Saturn is also feelings of isolation and loneliness, right? Restrictions, limitation, but also hard work and dedication, right? So Venus, the planet of relationships and attraction, and Saturn says, if you want this relationship to work, you got to do the work, right? You got to do the relational work. And this is part of the Venus Saturn conjunction, right? Venus is not naturally inclined to work, right? They really kind of want to like lay around and enjoy themselves, right? Like sit by the pool, drinking a cocktail, like having friends over, talking on the phone, being in relationship with people. And Saturn is like, no, we've got to work hard, right? And so Saturn points to the challenging work that it takes to make a relationship work, right? Or to kind of make anything work over a lasting period of time, right? Saturn points to the hard conversations and the self-work that needs to occur in order for connections to be lasting and meaningful, right? So this meeting of Venus and Saturn is part of Venus's retrograde journey, right? Where first she met up with Neptune and then the North Node and then finally Saturn, right? And so the conjunction with Neptune in the North Node occurred February the 1st, which may have initiated a new idea or vision about what we find beautiful, what we want out of relationships. Over the past 2 weeks, Venus has made retrograde connections with both Neptune and then the North Node. North Node was last week, and Neptune was the week before. Um, and so, as Venus is making these passes over the Neptune, the North Node, right? Venus is rethinking or revisiting the fantasy or the ideal that was initiated back in the beginning of February, right? And then the new behavioral patterns that is being created as a result of that. And in some cases, with the North Node, maybe a new hunger, right? North Node is sort of thirsty or hungry, right? That maybe was initiated by that Neptunian vision, that Neptunian kind of fantasy or dream. Now Venus is meeting up with Saturn, who represents the actual reality of the situation and the limits to what is possible. Right. So Saturn can be a roadblock on our road to romantic fantasy. It can also show us the places where this fantasy or vision requires the actual physical work to make it a reality. Right. Again, hard conversations or, shifting of boundaries, etc. Right. It also might reveal the places where this vision around Venusian themes of love, beauty, values, relationship may face limitations or restrictions, or the places where it's not actually based in reality, right? So we're getting a bit of a reality check from Saturn this week to our Venusian kind of relational or aesthetic or values, right? So Saturn conjunct Venus can also feel, again, isolating and lonely. A sense of isolation that Saturn brings can provide a sense of distance, which allows for the opportunity to observe our value systems, to observe our relationships, to observe like what I want and what I don't want, right? To observe, oh, do I actually think that this is attractive or beautiful? Does this bring me joy? Does it bring me joy? Right? Can bring up feelings of insecurity as well, right? But it provides an opportunity to create good boundaries in relationship, especially in Pisces, which is a sign where Venus is exalted, right? So in Pisces, Venus can really lean into the kind of tragic romantic character, right? Or the kind of fantasy or the daydream of relationship, or it can even verge into escapism through pleasure and pleasure seeking, right? However, Saturn kind of provides this realistic and practical component to love and relationships and values, and this can help to ground Venus's romantic longings in Pisces, right? Um, and Saturn also helps us to do, again, this difficult work to make a relationship work or to help us have more of what we like and less of what we don't, right? And that's values right there. Venus is like, that's gross. I don't want that. And Saturn's like, what are you going to do about it? Right. And if Venus is like, well, nothing, because I don't want them to get mad at me, then like you're going to be stuck with the stuff that you don't like. Right. So Saturn helps us to put in these boundaries and be like, nah, that's not for me. And which allows us to have more of what we actually like, right? It also helps us to be responsible for ourselves and others, right? As the Lord of karma, Saturn helps us to consider the impact that our actions have and to take responsibilities for the choices that we make, right? And relationship is really a container for that because if you make choices on your own, no one really cares, right? But it's in relationship, and this is not just romantic relationship, this is work relationship, this is, relationship with roommates. This is all of our relationships. When you do something, when you wash your roommate's cast iron with soap and they're like, hey, bro, don't do this, or cook meat in the vegan pan, right? Somebody's like, hey, who cooked bacon in my vegan pan? And then, right, we have to take responsibility for this, right? Which helps us to, be better in relationship through these Saturnian consequences of our actions and being held accountable. And relationship is great for accountability, right? Um, Venus being in the sign of their exaltation, which is Pisces, has more power here, which is kind of nice because Venus is benefic and Saturn is somebody who is visiting. Saturn tends to be malefic and they are harder to deal with, right? And they are visiting this land where Venus is exalted and raised up, right? So Saturn might be softened because they are needing to get resources from Venus's people, right? And also, there's this kind of secret relationship between Saturn and Venus because Saturn is exalted in Venus's sign of Libra, right? So there is an affinity between these two planets, which I think is kind of nice, right? And so, with Saturn being in Venus's sign coming into this conjunction and maybe being sweetened or softened, I think it helps, to loosen up that Saturnian part of ourselves, which can be an inner critic, right? That feels maybe isolated and alone. Maybe it can see like the joy or the pleasure in solitude as opposed to isolation. And this is a reframe that we can do around this, right? Maybe it softens that part that's critical of others or ourselves, right? We might feel distant from our relationships this first part of the week, right? But we can use this as a time of self-reflection, not self-criticism, and allow that sense of distance to be a space where we can cultivate love for ourselves, for each other, for the things in life that we love, right? And it's instead of a place occupied by judgment and resentment. And this gives us the chance to get real about what we value and what we love. You heard? All right. So also, oh yeah, just to let folks know, we this week is kind of front loaded. We have a bunch of stuff happening today, and then a kind of an easy time or a quiet time, and then a bunch of stuff happening at the end of the week on Saturday. And so we'll get to that when we get to that. So also today, Monday, April the 7th, we have Mercury stationing direct. Actually, I'm a hold on. I'm gonna skip that for a second. We'll go back and forth. Okay. So also today, Monday the 7th, we have Venus, who's retrograde in Pisces, not only conjunct Saturn, the greater malefic, but is also coming into a sextile, which is a supportive aspect to Uranus in Taurus at 25 degrees and 5 arc minutes. And remember, I started this whole shebang off talking about the Sun Jupiter sextile, which was between the active signs of Aries and Gemini. Now we have Venus in Pisces and Uranus in Taurus, which are both receptive signs, right? And this sextile is being formed between receptive areas of the chart. So just something to think about. So the same day that Venus comes into this restrictive conjunction with Saturn, they also make a supportive sextile to Uranus. Uranus is a planet of revolution and sudden change, and is sort of like focused on the ideal and wants to like reach the ideal no matter what, right? So they're forming this supportive sextile to Uranus, who might help create some breakthrough from the limitations that Saturn is opposing on our love lives and aesthetic experiences and relationships, right? However, sextiles again take some work to activate. So this is an opportunity to know that notice where there is an opening and there's the ability to shift things and provide a little bit more freedom and space in our relationships and the ways that we can create pleasure in life, right? So, when a door closes, a window opens, so they say, right? Uh, so when like Uranus experiences the Saturnian restrictions and constrictions, it can want to like cut things off and check out, right? So they like Uranus tends to want to like flip the table on things that don't live up to the ideal. Like, oh, this isn't working, or this is uncomfortable, or this is difficult. Like, I'm out of here. Forget about it. Right. Saturn wants to put in the hard work to like make these things real. And Saturn also says that this is sometimes, right, this is the best it's going to be, and we just got to live with it, right? We got to like suck it up and deal, right? This is the Saturnian reality, and it's hard work and it's suffering, and we just got to like pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and like really just make a go of it. And Uranus is like, absolutely not, bro. I'm not willing to hear that. I'd rather like burn it all down and start again than like suffer. Like that's dumb. And so Venus here is kind of caught in the middle, right? Conjunct Saturn on one hand, and then sextile Uranus on the other. And Saturn is like, no, we just got to suck it up and deal. And Uranus is like, let's get out of here, right? And like, that's maybe an easy choice to make, but, we got to think this through, right? And this is also the tension between the Senex archetype of the old wise person who is maybe conservative and responsible, who is like, we've got to plant our feet and like really make something of ourselves, right? And the puer aeternus, which is the archetype of the eternal youth, who is like, I'm out of here. I don't want to do anything that I don't want to do ever, right? I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And so this is the tension between the dedication to make something real and the work required in that process, and the part that just wants to enjoy themselves and do whatever they want to do without any responsibility or restrictions, right? And the idea is that it's not like one or the other, right? We're learning how to balance both of these, right? So that we're not living a life of suffering, because that's maybe not great. And we're not just like floating around from one thing to the next without ever like planting roots or like making anything happen, right? Or without ever taking responsibilities for our actions. And if we think about this in terms of relationship, right? Like, again, relationship is a space for accountability, right? For better or for worse. And this relationship is also a process of soul making, right? And individual growth through the relational container. And again, this is really a big theme in the Libra Aries axis, where we're experiencing the lunation at the end of the week, right? And so, the puer aeternus, that Uranus part is like, nah, I don't want to do anything that I don't want to do. I'm out of here, right? Like, oh, there's dirty dishes. Like, I gotta go. See ya, right? And like, the Senex, or that Saturn part, really wants to like pull that into the down to earth, right? And again, if we're thinking about this in the relational container, which is the sphere of Venus, right? If we are like always leaving when it gets difficult and following that kind of puer aeternus, like, ooh, like you're telling me that you didn't like what I did, I'm out, right? We're never going to be able to have like longer term, more fulfilling, lasting relationships. We're never going to be able to put down roots if we're always just leaving anytime like the going gets tough. You know what I'm saying? However, we don't want to like just sit there and be like, no, I have to make this work because I promised my ancestors, right? My grandma stayed in a loveless marriage, so I have to stay in a loveless marriage, right? This is what we do, right? So that is the like too much of the Senex, right? Too much of the responsibility. And so we're learning to balance responsibility and freedom, or Saturn and Uranus, through the relational container of Venus. So, I think this is really up this week. Um, yeah, so with Venus sextile to Uranus, it can also offer a break from our routines, right? So this might be the feeling of isolation or loneliness created by that like Saturn pressure, like increased responsibility in relationship. And Uranus can offer a different perspective and help to shift the energy, which might feel a little heavy and overbearing right now. And as a result of the like Saturnian pressure, this sextile might cause us to seek out excitement and novelty, which is things that Uranus loves, right? So Uranus might help other parts of our personality to emerge, right? It might help us to try new things and help us to respond to the challenges of Saturn in like cool and sort of out of the box ways. Where Saturn is concerned with like relational structure and responsibility, this Uranus sextile to Venus is more interested in freedom, excitement, and fun. And again, like, how do we have both of these? How do we have relational structures and responsibility to the people who are close to us, and also like still have fun and freedom and excitement, right? So the sextile also might awaken new parts of ourselves, especially in response to the pressure of the Saturn-Venus conjunction, right? And I have this image in my mind of like this pressure pushing something down, and then it sort of like squeezes out to the side, right? And that's the Uranus sextile, right? And it's just sort of like shifting to the side to relieve pressure, or to take a new direction, right? So this might wake up some new ways of relating and connecting, and it also might provide some out of the box ways of discussing relationship or pleasure, or joy, or these sort of Venusian qualities, right? Might cause us, the Saturnian pressure might wake up new desires in us, right? Uranus may be a response to the Saturnian feelings, but we also want to make sure we're not running away from doing the work, because the work will probably need to be done at some point, right? And again, we can't just like leave the space of accountability forever, because then like where is the growth in that? You know what I'm saying? And we don't want to just force something. We don't just want to not face something difficult and try and escape it through pleasure or engaging in something new and surface level, instead of like having the courage to go deeper and do some of this deeper work. And also, if our needs aren't being met, right? And if we're feeling cut off or isolated and alone, then maybe we want to follow the path of Uranus, right? Which opens us up to maybe being able to change the way things are structured, right? To restructure things and to try things that are maybe radical and new and exciting, right? But only you can know what's right for you. And I think the kind of the theme of the week is balance as we're coming up into this Libra new moon and what needs to shift so that we can come into a greater sense of balance. Okay. The other thing that's happening today, Monday, April the 7th, is we have Mercury stationing direct at 26 degrees and 49 arc minutes of Pisces. So that's cool, right? So now you can sign contracts and buy expensive electronics and travel with freedom and ease, except for if you're coming back into the United States, which I hear is like kind of a nightmare now. But anyway, we can save that for later. So we had Mercury stationing retrograde in Aries on March the 15th at 9 degrees and 35 arc minutes of the cardinal fire sign of Aries. They re-entered Pisces, the sign of their fall, by the by, on March 29th, and now they are stationing direct in Aries in Pisces at 26 degrees and 49 arc minutes, like I said, and they will re-enter Aries next week on April the 16th, or like around next week. So Mercury retrogrades are a time to go inward and to listen to the communications from our inner world. It causes us to slow down and reconsider where we are going and what we are doing and how we are communicating, right? This retrograde has moved between the cardinal fire sign of Aries, where Mercury is kind of like no nonsense and tells it how it is, into Pisces, where Mercury is in their fall and has a harder time expressing themselves. In Pisces, Mercury is really good at gathering intuitive information, but Mercury has a hard time of explaining where they got that information from. And as a result, the information that Mercury gathers in Pisces can oftentimes be discounted as conjecture or fantasy, which can be incredibly frustrating, especially when you're like, I know, right? The owls told me in a vision, and people are like, oh, that's cute, whatever, right? So I just want to say that one of the notable moments in this Mercury retrograde was the massive blunder of the signal leak. So let's just recount this. On March 15th, and this is the day that Mercury station retrograde, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth used the signal chat to a signal group chat to share classified details of the impending airstrike on the Houthis in Yemen, including types of aircraft and missiles, as well as launch and attack times. This is a commercial chat platform and is definitely not the place to be sharing classified national security information. And on top of that, the editor of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, was added to the chat because his number got sucked in somehow. So that's funny. And on March 24th, and this is the day that Mercury was conjunct the Sun, and one day after the Sun sextile Pluto, and one day before Mercury sextile Pluto, Jeffrey Goldberg published a partially redacted transcript of the signal group chat in the Atlantic. And the White House National Security Council spokesman Brian Hughes verified the chat's authenticity. The Trump administration tried to dispute these claims that they were discussing highly classified war plans in a group chat with a journalist. And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth even went on TV saying he did not discuss bombing a foreign nation without congressional approval on Signal. So on March 25th, the day after the Mercury Sun conjunction, and the day that Mercury was sextile Pluto, Jeffrey Goldberg published the whole chat in the Atlantic and made everyone look really stupid. And so this is a Mercury retrograde shit right here, right? And if you listen back to my report that week, I talk about hidden information coming to light or underworld activities being exposed with Mercury sextile Pluto. And I don't like to say I told you so, but like this is one of those events where I'm like, damn, astrology is pretty spot on right here, you know? And like with like Mercury also retrograde in Aries, which is a Mars ruled sign that has to do with conflict at times, right? And this sort of like hidden war information coming to light because a journalist who is a mercurial figure added to a group chat, which is like some Mercury retrograde shit right there, and then publishing your group chat. Sorry, I just like it's like it tickles me because it's so dumb, and also it like really speaks to the astrology of the moment, right? So now, just a heads up, Mercury is going to go back over those degrees in the next couple of weeks. And this may cause us to revisit this event and how this event has evolved, right? And also, yeah. And so now that Mercury is moving direct, they will be moving forward through their shadow until April 26th when they hit that 9 degree of Aries point. And as Mercury goes back over these degrees in early Aries again, we may experience resolution to some of the retrograde situations that we experienced. Packages that are lost in the mail may arrive, miscommunications may be resolved, etc. And we may face the consequences of the blunders and mistakes that we made during the retrograde process. And I'm interested again to see how this signal leak issue unfolds over the rest of April because I'm pretty sure we're not done with that. And Mercury will again sextile Pluto on April the 20th. So pay attention around that date for whatever new like dumb information comes up. And again, that signal leak was totally Mercury retrograde tail and just reminds us that you want to double check what you were saying and who you were saying it to just before you go blurting out top secret war plans to a journalist on your unsecured group chat. And yeah, so just something to think about. Of course, now we have some different problems as Neptune has moved into Aries and Trump has dissolved trillions of dollars of wealth right on cue. And so, whew, sorry. Um, I think with Mercury's like stationing direct, also it's a shift of energy, right? And we have been rethinking and redoing and reconsidering and reimagining. And now Mercury is stationed direct, which means that they have stopped moving in the sky. So it's not just the time to take action, but we have an opportunity to kind of gather our energy and to look over the things that we have been rethinking and reimagining and redoing, and then begin taking action around these, especially when Mercury re-enters Aries, which is a Mars ruled sign, which is about fighting and action and like claiming space and taking action around the things that have been developing in the unconscious of Pisces. So just a heads up there, right? And so energies are starting to shift this week because we're going to have Venus stationing direct at the end of the week as well. Excuse me. Okay, so speaking of the end of the week, let's get on over there. Where are we at? Yeah, so we got a pretty light week in space until Saturday, April the 12th, when we're going to experience this full moon in Libra, which I've been teeing up for most of my talk today. Full moon in Libra will be occurring at 23 degrees and 19 arc minutes of the cardinal air sign of Libra, meaning that the moon is in Libra at that degree and the sun is across the zodiac in Aries. When we have a full moon, we have an opposition of the sun and the moon because the sun's light illuminates the moon, the reflective surface of the moon. When we have a new moon, we have a conjunction, and that's why we don't see it. Okay, so this full moon will occur at 5:22 in the PM Pacific time on Saturday, April the 12th, making that 8:33 in the PM on the East Coast. Venus will station direct about 30 minutes after this full moon culminates. But in the full moon chart, Venus is retrograde. Venus also rules Libra, so something to consider, right? So this lunation may be shining a light on some of the Venus retrograde themes around relationship and values and aesthetics and the things that we have been rethinking during Venus's retrograde journey. Also, themes of diplomacy may come up because these are Libra themes, and personal understandings of our individuality, and that has developed through the container of a relationship, right? So Libra is about balance. What is out of balance that needs to be released in order to bring things back into a balanced state. Right? The Saturn conjunction with Venus is reminding us to get real, right? So again, Venus, ruler of Libra, kind of important for this lunation. Coming off this conjunction with Neptune, right, a couple weeks back, might be wearing some rose-colored glasses. Then Venus was conjunct the North Node, Rahu, last week, which might have created a sense of hunger or a feeling of craving, especially related to the Neptunian kind of vision or fantasy or daydream. Because when Venus conjunct Neptune in the North Node the first time, they were conjunct on February 1st. So this is revisiting sort of our daydream or vision around Venusian themes, and also the hunger that sparked, right? Maybe Venus coming off that North Node conjunction, maybe trying to get more of something. Now, with this full moon, Venus is coming off the Saturn conjunction. Saturn deals with austerity and reality. So this may be like a reality check, right? What is actually happening here? What do we actually need? What is too much, right? And where are things out of balance? And I think this is a very important question because Libra is the sign of the scales and is very interested in balance, right? So what might need to be released or let go of to bring the scales of Libra back into balance, right? The full moon is a culminating point, which is, we see the thing, that the seed that has been planted coming to fruition, and we're like, that's what it is. Okay, now what needs to be adjusted so that we can carry on with this? What is too much in this situation? What is out of balance? Right. So what might need to be released so that we can come back into a sense of balance or create a new sense of harmony, right? And so with Venus coming off of the Saturn conjunction, we have an opportunity to get real about what is coming to the surface and what can be shed to bring our system back into balance, right? Chiron is also conjunct the sun during this lunation. So there may be old wounds that become illuminated. We may notice these wounds motivating us in some ways, or we may see how these wounds have been motivating us in the past. Have we abandoned ourselves in order to fit in or to receive love, right? That is a Libra wound right there. Or are we cutting people off because we are afraid of being hurt and afraid of vulnerability, right? That is a Aries wound right there. These are both ways that the Chiron's wound can be activating that Libra Aries axis, which is all about self and other, right? And how we are in relationship with each other, right? So this lunation happening in the Libra Aries axis, dealing with this relationship of self and other and the development of self through relationship with others. So Aries defines the self through expressing our individuality, right? Libra defines the self through relating with others and exploring and defining boundaries. And so this Libra Aries axis is all about developing our individuality while maintaining a relationship with other people. And again, I want to be clear that this is not just romantic relationship. We are constantly in relationship, right? We are in relationship with each other in, work, in school, in, the people that we commute with on the bus. We're in relationship with them. We are in relationship with the person at the coffee shop. We are in relationship with the plants in our house, with our pets, with the things that we see on a regular basis. Anything that we have, observe on a regular basis, that we are interacting with on a regular basis, we are in relationship with. And so it's really important to remember that and not be like, oh, it's only like my monogamous partner that I'm in relationship with, because that's not true. That's pretty narrow-minded, right? And so, yeah, again, like this axis of Libra and Aries is about our individuality in relationship with others, right? So Aries is a leader, right? Because it needs to do things in its own way. And it's not comfortable being led by others. It's courageous, enthusiastic, original, independent, and it is focused on expressing the individual self through action, right? May not be aware of how one's actions affect those around them, however, right? Where Libra is relational and is hyper aware of how actions impact others. Libra understands the responsibility of being an individual, and seeks to maintain balance and harmony in relationships with others. Right? Libra is about diplomacy, and Aries is about action. Right? And so we can, during this lunation towards the end of the week, we can, and probably like start doing it now, we can check in with ourselves and see about the balance between ourself and the other, right? And what might need to shift or be let go of to come into a better sense of balance in this axis of life. So holding that, we also have on Saturday, April the 12th, which is going to be in full effect during this lunation, conjunction between the Sun and Chiron at 22 degrees and 59 arc minutes. So Chiron, for wounding, everybody's favorite, right? Woohoo! Right? The sun illuminating. So we have this opportunity to have our wounds illuminated, right? And so with this conjunction happening, this is also opposing the moon. So this is also going to be like really big in the full moon chart, and themes of core wounding coming to the surface, being illuminated, and also being reflected back to us. Remember, the moon is basically a giant mirror in space, right? So the Chiron kind of core wound is being reflected back to us, maybe in the through the container of our relationship. And how are we gonna show up for that? How are we gonna deal with this? All right. Also, on top of all this, this is near America's natal Chiron at 20 degrees of Aries. I've been talking about this for a couple weeks. Right. So this may be illuminating not only my core wounds and your core wounds, but some of America's core wounds as well. Right. One of the ones that came to me today as a core wound of America is American exceptionalism, right? Which is being really kind of tested at this moment, right? And I think that American exceptionalism is sort of a defense against experiencing the wound, right? America's forged out of trauma. People who were political prisoners, persecuted for their religious beliefs, who experienced violence and trauma in Europe, came to America and basically replicated these traumas on the indigenous population, right? And trauma begets trauma, right? And the sun, which deals with our identity and our higher vision, meets up with Chiron. It illuminates the wounds and issues which have not been resolved, right? And I think American exceptionalism is a way that we're like, no, we're good. Like, that's the past. Oh, I don't need to pay attention to that. That's other people's stuff, right? Like eventually it's going to come up and like need to be dealt with in some capacity, right? When Chiron is unskillful, they try and cover over the discomfort they are experiencing with whatever they can find. Drugs, alcohol, news, TV, social media, etc. List goes on and on. Even spiritual practice, healing herbs, meditation, prayer, etc. Right? Somebody once told me, and I love this, whatever we can put between ourselves and the hard edge of reality, we will cling to for dear life. And I think this is some Chiron shit right there, right? I mean, I think that this transcends a lot of things. I think this is human nature, right? But this sense of, oh, I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. So I'm going to like hold on to whatever I can, right? To prevent that, right? And so whenever the Chiron wound gets activated, there's a tendency to go back into their cave and wallow and to do whatever we can to cover up the wound. Maybe this isn't a bad thing, right? Because the wound is pretty gnarly. We need to find ways to be with it, right? We don't want to just like rip off the wubby, right? The comfort blanket, right? We want to find ways of being able to sit with the wound without it totally dysregulating us, right? And so we want to find ways to self-soothe, but ways that don't cause us to ignore, right? Or to check out because we actually like can't ignore it, right? But remember, it's the places where things break that allows the light to shine through, right? Or like Leonard Cohen says, there's a crack in everything, and that's where the light gets in. And I think this is a really important component of Chiron, right? It's not about like preventing the experience of the wound. It's about being able to open to it in safe and healthy ways so that that light can shine through, right? So Chiron, my man, the centaur, is also a teacher of heroes. And the sun is a very heroic character. So Chiron becomes the teacher of heroes through facing his core wound of abandonment and moving into action to learn about the things that can help him and others. Chiron's first wound wound of abandonment is healed through service. He learns music, hunting, medicine, poetry, all of these as ways of supporting himself and supporting others, right? He uses these acts in the service of others. He teaches people who have oftentimes come from dubious parentage how to be heroic and to live with honor, to show up and do the right thing, how to be courageous, and also how to be soft, right? We can think about the sun's conjunction with Chiron as this wise centaur connecting with that solar heroic part of ourselves and teaching us how to show up and be the heroes for ourselves, right? And so during this full moon, during the sun's conjunction with Chiron, we can ask ourselves, what does Chiron have to teach me? What wisdom does this centaur, who is half human and half animal, have for me about the integration of these parts of myself? The intellectual top down part of me who wants to know and to understand the world, that is skilled in assessing for danger so that they can make good decisions, and the bottom up intuitive animal part of me who is connected to the world in a different way and moves on instinct and hears the call of intuition. And how do I hold both of these parts and integrate them into the path of the hero, right? And again, Libra is learning to hold both things and bring them into balance, right? And how do I like hold both of these things and use them to open the path of the hero or the hero's journey? And how can I use this and use this wisdom and this understanding and the balance that I come to in myself to be of service to others? Another part of this story is that at the beginning of Chiron's tale, he is abandoned by his mom and his dad, Kronos, who is like bad dad of the year, right? And he's sitting there all alone, cold and crying, and he is found by Artemis, who is the personification of moonlight, and her twin brother Apollo, the personification of sunlight. And they take Chiron in and they teach him everything he needs to know. And so, on one hand, Chiron helps heroes to shine their light and their solar light into the world. And on the other hand, Chiron is a student of the sun. They are the child of Saturn or physical reality, but they are raised by the light of the sun and the moon, these ephemeral and aspirational qualities. And so, with this conjunction, we can also think about what the sun has to teach us, right? To help us heal our wounds, right? What can we learn from the sun? One of the best things that I've ever learned from the sun is that the sun just shines its light. It doesn't care. And it's not like, oh, I'm not going to shine on you because you're different or you're weird or you said that thing about me, right? The sun is never like, oh God, do you think it's too much? Right? The sun just is out there doing its thing, shining its light. And this is, I think one of the things that comes up with Chiron is like he's kind of a freak, right? Half human, half horse. His dad pieced out and his mom was like, oh my God, my baby's a monster and I don't want to raise him. I'd rather be a tree than to take care of this kid. And so Chiron has this like wound of core shame of being like, oh, I'm different, I don't fit in, right? And maybe I need to hide my light, or maybe I need to be more like, this person or that person, right? But what Apollo or the sun teaches us is, oh no, we are all like unique and divine beings who get to shine our light in this world. We don't have to hide it, right? And so Apollo is also able to see the potential in Chiron that Chiron was not able to see in himself, right? So as the sun moves over this sensitive point and illuminates some parts of ourselves that the world, some parts of ourselves and the world that are painful and uncomfortable, right? What can this illuminate about our potential that we can't see about ourselves because we are too scared or in too much pain? Right? As the sun shines on us and shines on these parts of us that we're like, no, right? What does that reveal about the ways that we can just show up and be our authentic selves in the world? Because it is the places that we've experienced trauma or pain, right, that open the path to healing. And this path to healing helps us to be of service to carry other people along on this journey with us. Right? And again, one of the best things that I've ever heard about a healer is it is somebody who is so involved in their healing journey that they can't help but bring others along with them. Right. And so, like, how can we learn this lesson from Apollo and see the parts of ourselves where there is great potential and there's the opportunity to heal and to help that, we may not be able to see for ourselves? And then how can we be this for other people? right? To hold others in high regard and to illuminate the positive qualities that we see in them that they may not be able to see in themselves, right? And I think that this is really important, right? To exalt each other and to see each other and to be able to tune in to the places where we have potential, especially in these times of fear and great challenge. So I'm kind of coming to a close with my report, but I got one more transit that I just want to touch on before I let you all go. Hold on. Also, on Saturday, April the 12th, rounding us out for the week in space, we have Venus finally stationing direct at 24 degrees and 37 arc minutes of Pisces. Venus has been retrograde since March the 1st. They stationed retrograde at 10 degrees and 50 arc minutes of Aries. They retrograded back into Pisces, the sign of their exaltation, on March 27th, and they will be in Pisces until April the 30th. And again, they're stationing direct on Saturday, April the 12th, about 30 minutes after the full moon culminates, right? And so the Venus retrograde journey has been about reviewing, rethinking, reconsidering, reimagining Venusian themes of love, beauty, relationship, values, aesthetics, right? And one of the ways that I like to think about this story, and many other people have thought about this story in the past, is through the descent of Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, which is a Sumerian myth. And so I've talked about it on this show. I talk about it on my radio show. I will be putting out another episode about it on my radio show when Venus Station's direct. But at the end of this tale, spoiler alert, at the end of this tale, right? Well, if you didn't catch this before, Inanna, who is the queen of heaven and earth, hears a call from the below, which might be the unconscious. She goes down into the Kur, which is the Sumerian underworld, to meet her twin sister Ereshkigal. On her way down, she is stripped of all of her power objects and enters into the throne room of Ereshkigal naked and bowed low. At which point, Ereshkigal promptly kills her and hangs her on a hook on the wall, right? And then from some support and help on the surface, her personal assistant Ninshubur goes and talks to Enki, who hooks her up and makes these two non-binary beings, the Kirigara and the Galator, who fly into the underworld and show Ereshkigal compassion. And Ereshkigal is so moved by the compassion and empathy that she has shown that she's like, y'all can have anything that you want. And they take Inanna's corpse, they sprinkle the food of life on Inanna and the water of life on Inanna. She comes back to life and emerges from the underworld, from the Kur. And this is sort of the Venus retrograde cycle of stationing retrograde and going into the underworld, conjunct the sun, right, and being combust and burning up, or being hung on a hook on the wall, and now this sort of re-emergence, right? And Venus will be re-emerging as the morning star and this return to the surface. Now, as Inanna is returning to the surface, the Anuna, the judges of the underworld, are like, not so fast, right? We need to keep a balance, right? Libran theme right here. We need to keep this balance of, the dead and the living, right? So like now, if you're leaving, there is a vacancy here that needs to be filled. So you get to choose somebody to take your place. So Inanna goes back to the surface and sees Ninshubur, who did all this work for her, and the Anuna are like, oh, what about her? And Inanna's like, no, not Ninshubur. Like, she hooked me up. She said all these prayers and got all these people to help me. Like, you can't choose her. And they're like, what about your son? And Nana's like, no, no, he prayed for me the whole time. And they're like, okay, what about the stranger? And she's like, no, no, I don't even know that person. Like, I can't smote him, right? And then they come to Dumuzi, Nana's deadbeat husband, who is just hanging out in her Mojo Dojo Casa house and drinking brewski beers. And yeah, Ken from Barbie is the Dumuzi character, and the Barbie movie is a retelling of this tale. But Inanna sees him, and he's like, "Hey, babe, where you been? Like, oh, I kind of missed you." And she's like, "Yo, I've been dead, and you didn't do anything." And he's like, "Oh, sucks for you. Anyway, will you pass me another brewski beer?" And Anana's like, "Take him. This is the one. Found the dude." right? And so the Anuna go to take him, and he actually like turns himself into a snake and slithers away. And the next part of the tale is about Dumuzi being pulled into the underworld and a sort of deal that is struck. And Dumuzi becomes a sort of Persephone character who spends part of the year in the underworld and part of the year as a fertility god, right? So Persephone or Osiris, right? The story goes, all over the place, right? There's a continual stories of fertility gods who spend half the year in the underworld and half the year, bringing life back to the planet, right? So anyway, I bring this in because I love this story. And also this is a way of thinking about, okay, now we are moving direct. Now this energy around our value system has shifted, right? What do we do with this? Right? What do we do with this in the relational container? Right. And for Anana, she was like, oh, these people have like actually been supportive to me, and these are the relationships that I want. These are the relationships that are aligned with my values. And this dude sucks, right? And now maybe I don't need to put up with it anymore, right? Because as Venus finishes their retrograde and becomes the morning star, they are much more active and directive and less passive. They're less like, oh, I need other people to like me. They're more like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. Right, this is what I want. This is what I desire. This is how my values are directing me to act. Right. And so again, I want to loop this back around to this Aries Libra axis, right? And the self and the other, right? And how do we, as we have been cultivating these sort of relational values or aesthetic values or just value values, right? That feel very meaningful to us during the Venus retrograde process. And now how do we enact them in our relationships and say, this is not right for me, right? Or I need things to change, or I would like it more this way, or you know what, I don't want to be here anymore, right? I'm not saying like that we need to end relationships, right? But I think that this is an opportunity to like, we have gone through this underworld journey where we have been hung on a hook on the wall, right? Where we have ideally met our Ereshkigal, our sort of lonely, uncared for shadow self, and shown that compassion, and in some ways maybe integrated the chthonic desires of Ereshkigal, because she's kind of a beast, right? She has appetites and desires, and being an underworld goddess, a chthonic goddess, we don't get a lot, like that part doesn't get a lot of love or compassion, right? It is sort of hidden away and rejected. So like part of this process maybe was to be reintegrating that, or at least noticing these parts that feel like left out and alone, or who have been rejected or shamed, and being able to show them compassion and love and acceptance, and reintegrating them into our personality, right, into our system. And now we are showing up with Venus moving direct, and with this chthonic power of Ereshkigal in the underworld. By our powers combined, right? We are Inanna, queen of heaven and earth, who's showing up and being like, you know what? Like, I'm not taking this anymore. Like, this relationship is not for me, right? I know myself a lot better, and I don't have to put up with this malarkey, right? From you fools. So I don't know. That's enough out of me. I've said all the words that I know. I appreciate you all tuning in for another exciting week in space. Again, I'm your host with the most, Joan Emerson Bell, Blind Stallion Space Wizard on Instagram. I do a radio show called The Melee Report, which is all the astro weather you never thought you needed, set to all the music you never thought you would hear. I try and put this out every week sometimes. This week's episode I completed last night, and I will be making available to the general public as soon as I am off this. So check my stories on Instagram, or check the show notes on YouTube. Also, if you like this, like it and subscribe, follow, send it out to people, share it. I don't know, do what the other influencers tell you to do. I'm not very good at this. I just like talking about astrology, and I really appreciate that y'all show up and listen. But yeah, if this is meaningful to you, share it to somebody else that might also find it meaningful, or subscribe, or check out the Melee Report, because that is my true passion. It's like this show, but more rock, less talk. Check it out, you'll see. And other than that, I'll be speaking at LA Astrofest at the end of April. I'm going to be giving a talk on astrology and parts work and IFS, and how we can use astrological magic as a way to work with our parts for psychological change. Anyway, it's going to be awesome. There are going to be a number of other great astrologers at that conference, including Sam Reynolds, Lindsay Turner, Blair Bogan, a bunch of other folks. Come check us out. And apparently, people were texting me being like, Chris Brennan just said your name. Chris Brennan just said your name. So I haven't listened to the astrology podcast episode yet, but I think that Chris Brennan just gave LA Astrofest a shout out, which I really appreciate. Yeah, it's cool. It's going to be a good time. Come check it out. And oh, yeah, I'm also going to be giving a free lecture on addiction and storytelling through Southwestern College. When I get around to it, I'll put a link to that in the show notes and stuff in the stories. But that's going to be pretty cool. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. That's free. It's going to be online. So if you're interested in mythology, fairy tale, or working with people with addictions, or maybe working on your own addictions, come check it out. It's free. Should be a good time. Anywho, that is all the astro weather that is fit to print, my friends. Thank you so much for showing up and tuning in. I wish you all a great week in space and a very happy and balanced Libra full moon. Yeah. Until next time, good people, be good to yourselves, be good to each other. And as always, may the force be with you. And I'll see you next week for another exciting week in space. Bye now.